No, we did not.
How much did he pay?
Excuse me, Mr. Scott? You're gonna be respectful. You had sexual relations with 3 men. Now, you don't want your son to suffer for your mistakes, so you've requested paternity testing, which led you to believe you were the only potential father of this child.
Yes, ma'am.
You claim there's no way you're the child's father, and you're going to prove that today.
Yes, ma'am.
He wasn't even aware of the possibility until Ms. Hatcher's son was almost 2 years old.
I did have a 5.5-month fling with Mr. Scott, and I also had...
No, Your Honor, that is not true.
And I had a one-night stand with him around the time. And I also had a one-night stand with Mr. Blake. He knows that we don't have a working refrigerator and a stove. And he comes over to my house and he still has the same attitude, nasty attitude that he has now.
You had a 5.5-month fling with a gentleman that can look across the aisle at you and ask you, how much does someone pay for your sexual services?
Inside Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the atmosphere is not dramatic by staging but by reality itself. This is not a show of performances but a legal arena where DNA results, parental accusations, and emotional histories meet the strict frame of jurisprudence. Here, the relationship between law and justice does not rely on who is louder, who cries harder, or who remembers events more clearly. It relies on proof. It relies on the weight of evidence, the structure of the evidence stage in divorce case mechanics, and the unshakable principle that truth, once revealed, cannot be reversed. If people regret anything in this space, they regret not the test itself but the moment the truth arrived, and their identities were forced to change with it. In this recorded dispute, multiple individuals have arrived with different motives. Some want emotional closure, some demand legal security, some hope for personal redemption, and some simply hope the results cancel their responsibility forever. Judge Lauren Lake listens not to win an argument but to align every piece of testimony with the long-standing concept of justice in jurisprudence, the very architecture that ensures each child, each couple, and each contested name on a birth certificate lands on truth that will stand in state record, Supreme Court filing, and child support calculation. The courtroom is filled with layered narratives, men claiming betrayal, mothers confessing timelines with shame, and children at the center who cannot testify but whose futures shift with every sentence and every revealed date. The structure is not cinematic, it is procedural. Judge Lauren Lake does not provide comfort to protect adult feelings. Her singular mission is to guard the legal identity of a child. In every DNA case, she reminds litigants that justice is not revenge, and that the court is not here to destroy reputations, but to correct the mistakes made outside of the legal system. The Courtroom Dynamic reflects what Listeners of Truth Changes Everything podcast here when attorneys dissect how DNA shifts not only the emotional reality but the legal one. Property rights, medical history, inheritance, and legitimacy in state record. It is echoed by the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, where strategy meets personal consequence, and by the Divorce Course podcast, where spouses learn that the Adverse Inference in Evidence Act ensures that silence, withholding evidence, or evasiveness becomes evidence itself. Inside Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, when a mother stands to admit she slept with 3 different men during a conception window, the court is not disgusted, it is focused. Documentation, hospital records, signed birth certificates, text logs, and calendar markings become more important than tears. People regret taking DNA tests only when they wanted the feeling of fatherhood without the science of genetics. This courtroom does not hold space for self-made illusions, only verified lineage. Every litigant enters believing their version deserves to win. They speak as if truth can be shaped, softened, repositioned, or decorated to fit their heart. But Judge Lauren Lake does not operate on emotional testimony. She operates on the DNA test, on the certifiable proof that cannot be edited. She reminds both sides that in family law, justice is not about who was morally better, but about who is biologically, legally and financially responsible. Those who walked in expecting sympathy are instead given structure. Those who plan to hide behind misunderstanding are given medical evidence. Even those who show desperation are told that desperation does not replace documentation. Celebrate recovery testimonies often talk about truth setting a person free, but in this space, truth sets a child's future in order. No matter how many adults are overwhelmed by the results, the law protects minors first. The courtroom becomes a place where recovery is not spiritual alone, but legal. Judge Lauren Lake ensures that the audience, the litigants, and the viewing public understand that DNA testing is not just about confirming biology. It is about aligning responsibility. Fatherhood becomes no longer a possibility but a mandatory legal status when results declare it. For some, it brings relief and closure. For others, it brings lifelong obligation. And for some, it brings disappointment that their escape attempt failed. The adoption stories full episodes that so many viewers reference remind audiences that raising a child is not always a biological destination but a legal one. Still, when biology is contested, it must be proven. When a man signs a birth certificate but later denies involvement, he must face results that either confirm or dissolve his claim. When a mother requests testing on 3 men, she is not judged morally by the court but factually. In Judge Lauren Lake's voice, the universal reminder is clear. Children deserve legal certainty, regardless of adult chaos. She commands the courtroom with a tone that has become synonymous with the modern intersection of courtroom television and legal education. Her voice is a bridge between the dramatized arguments of cheating stories and the institutional fairness that mirrors the highest levels of legal interpretation, including the Supreme Court itself. Law students studying the concept of justice in jurisprudence observe her not for glamour but for disciplined application. Consent, paternity acknowledgement, DNA verification, state recording, custody, and support. What unfolds in her courtroom is not an emotional scene but a systematic evaluation of responsibility. The man who feared paternity loses fear when results announce fatherhood. The woman who felt shame stands with relief when certainty replaces speculation. And even when adults shake with tension, Judge Lauren Lake redirects them to purpose. The child deserves identity. The judicial chair does not elevate her to dominance but to duty. She repeats that truth changes everything, not because it makes adults feel better, but because it unblocks a life path for a minor who was living in uncertainty. Whether litigants learned mediation skills through the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, spiritual repair through Celebrate Recovery testimonies, or marital breakdown insight through the Divorce Course podcast, the courtroom is where everything collapses into one decisive moment: the envelope containing the DNA results. When that envelope opens, no argument survives. No timeline can be re-edited. No emotional excuse remains relevant. The law enters, and conversations about cheating, betrayal, or regret fall silent. The results conclude biological identity, and identity concludes legal duty. Here, where evidence is stronger than narrative, and proof is stronger than memory, Judge Lauren Lake stands as the judicial voice reminding everyone that children cannot wait while adults unravel. In this courtroom, truth is not a punishment. It is a structure. It is stability. It is the end of chaos and the beginning of accountability. Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom continues as the only space where individuals must surrender arguments to documented truth. She does not permit circular blame, emotional outbursts, or personal histories to erase what the law requires. She insists that biological certainty precedes emotional preference. Her tone echoes decades of legal doctrine. Parenthood is not an opinion, not a sentimental claim, and not a voluntary title based on convenience. It is a legal status defined by DNA and enforced by state authority through child support, medical rights, and identity records. Inside this legal forum, the relationship between law and justice is tested every day. Justice is not the feeling of fairness. Justice is the structured application of verified facts. Family law forces adults to face what they created, whether intentionally, recklessly, or ignorantly. Judge Lauren Lake emphasizes that no matter how complicated adult relationships become, the child must not carry the residue. This courtroom is not a stage for reputation repair, but a mechanism of state record correction. When individuals speak of regret, it is not the regret of intimacy, but the regret of consequences. People regret taking DNA tests only when the truth they tried to outrun becomes binding. They regret the shift of identity, the sudden transformation from private denials to public confirmation. They regret the legal obligations that instantly activate under parental determination statutes, including adverse inference in Evidence Act implications, when one refuses cooperation. Every litigant who stands before Judge Lauren Lake must understand that the court is not discussing feelings but accountability. Her statements mirror high-level jurisprudence. Truth changes everything, but the transformation is not emotional, it is procedural. Once DNA identifies the father, the state moves, the legal name solidifies, and support calculations are no longer hypothetical. The court does not blame, it assigns responsibility. In many cases, former couples arrive clinging to narratives, assumptions, and emotional wounds. Some tell stories as if the court is a confessional booth rather than a jurisdictional body. They speak of betrayal, jealousy, infidelity, and guilt, but Judge Lauren Lake redirects them. Morality is not the determinant, biology is. The courtroom becomes the borderline between human memory and medical certainty. Listeners who follow legal commentary on Truth Changes Everything podcast and analysis on the Game-Changing Attorney podcast understand this intersection clearly. DNA is the ultimate deposition. No cross-examination can undo it. No timeline argument can weaken it. No denial can weaken it. When men argue that a child resembles someone else, or when women present emotional reasoning to justify expectation, Judge Lauren Lake does not reject them, but she does not anchor judgment on them. She anchors on the test. The courtroom environment continues to unfold as a controlled legal exchange, not emotional spectacle. Each lawyer, each litigant, and each observer recognizes that Judge Lauren Lake does not perform authority, she executes it. She reminds parents that a child is not a side effect of adult desire, but the central legal subject of the case. If adults walk away embarrassed, disappointed, or relieved, their emotional outcomes remain secondary to the child's permanent identity. This mirrors the structure of the Divorce Course podcast, which teaches that separation, parenting rights, and support decisions must remove ego if justice is to function. Just like those teachings, Judge Lauren Lake exposes how adults complicate circumstances with silence, denial, and avoidance, until DNA dismantles the illusion. The legal phenomenon of adverse inference becomes relevant when one party resists testing or refuses to appear. Silence is interpreted not as absence but as evidence. The courtroom continues as a place not of confession but of verification. When mothers admit to multiple partners in a conception window, the court does not scold them. It clarifies documentation. When fathers deny children based on personal distrust rather than scientific proof, the court dissolves emotional reasoning through laboratory results. In these hearings, concept of justice in jurisprudence is not philosophical. It is applied through enforcement orders, corrected parentage records, and child support mandates grounded in state guidelines. Even when individuals describe their anguish, humiliation, and regret, Judge Lauren Lake steers them toward the legal center, the child's rights. She frequently reminds litigants that bobbies are not to be disqualified because adults acted without precaution. Legal identity does not bend to preference. The courtroom, like the state, recognizes only verified lineage. The echo of Celebrate Recovery testimonies is seen not as spiritual confession but as structural truth. Adults must face themselves before a child pays for their secrecy. DNA, in this legal context, becomes the recovery moment, not emotional recovery but jurisdictional restoration. The truth rebuilds the legal life of the child. It stabilizes their inheritance trail, their medical record, their citizenship legitimacy, and their financial security. Judge Lauren Lake corrects each misunderstanding of fatherhood. She clarifies that signing a birth certificate without knowledge does not remove legal consequence. If DNA confirms paternity, the signature becomes legally anchored. If DNA disproves, the signature becomes amendable. Neither pleasure nor anger decides who the father is. Only genetics do. Her courtroom becomes the living example of family law principle. Identity is the child's property, not the parent's argument. Multiple pairs of adults sit before her, often convinced that their emotional pain deserves priority, but she returns them to legal anchoring. She reminds them that while cheating stories may entertain culture, they destroy clarity in court unless replaced with timestamps, medical evidence, and genetic conclusions. She insists on shifting from narrative to documentation. The continuation of these hearings also reflects what legal academics discuss in the relationship between law and justice. Law is the structure. Justice is the outcome when structure is honored. Judge Lauren Lake demonstrates that justice is not a feeling, not applause, not vindication. It is a determined and enforceable record. In the same way that adoption stories' full episodes depict long-awaited confirmations of belonging, the DNA results in this courtroom finalize biological belonging. Not lovingly, not poetically, but legally, which is the only form that matters in state record archives and future legal disputes. When the final result is spoken, the courtroom does not shout for narrative victory. It transitions into obligation. The parent declared must participate in schooling decisions, medical permissions, and financial contributions. The parent not declared must release emotional claim, not out of cruelty but clarity. The child cannot exist in multiple identity claims. Law eliminates ambiguity where adults created it. Judge Lauren Lake continues to frame the court as a corrective institution. Families do not enter balanced. They enter cracked by secrecy, infidelity, confusion, and regret. But they exit with legal shape, whether they are pleased or shattered. This is her mission and her boundary. She is not here to punish but to finalize. In her courtroom, even the tears have legal weight. They are documentation of emotional truth but not replacement for scientific truth. When she reads results, the transition from human conflict to legal closure becomes absolute. In Judge Lauren Lake's courtroom, the conclusion of a paternity dispute is not the end of conflict but the beginning of ordered life. Once DNA speaks, every emotional version of truth collapses into a single verified identity. The judge ensures that no party leaves unaware of the legal implications, because truth changes everything. And in this courtroom, truth does not merely expose, it legislates. The parent declared through DNA is assigned not symbolic fatherhood but legal fatherhood, which includes Supreme Court, recognized child support obligations, health decision access, financial duty, and state record acknowledgement. The mother, regardless of regret or fear, must align her actions to the formal identity now established. Judge Lauren Lake reminds every adult that a child cannot afford confusion. Legally, psychologically, and socially, identity must be singular, not rotating between multiple male possibilities or emotional wish lists. This is the precise point where the relationship between law and justice becomes visible. Justice here is not about who behaved well or who betrayed whom. Justice is the protection of the child's identity. Adults may feel devastated, relieved, or vindicated, but the child's legal certainty outranks the adult's personal narrative. The judge makes one truth unmistakable. No matter how chaotic the adult journey was, the child must exit with clarity. Throughout these proceedings, individuals often relive uncomfortable pasts, admitting multiple partners, overlapping relationships, emotional fallout, dishonesty, and abandonment. Yet this courtroom does not serve emotional memory. It serves evidence. The evidence stage in divorce case procedures teaches that truth does not negotiate with recollection. It stamps itself into legal form. Arguments, regrets, and blame stories are background noise against the DNA's final declaration. As referenced in the Game-Changing Attorney podcast, legal outcomes are not built on sympathy but on enforceable facts. Judge Lauren Lake's insistence that no litigant speak over another, no voice dominate through aggression, and no narrative overshadow the child reflects foundational jurisprudence. Law must outlive behavior. Parents who arrive expecting a platform for dramatic justification are redirected to the structure of adverse inference in Evidence Act standards. If one avoids testing, delays communication, or refuses documentation, that refusal becomes evidence itself. Silence does not protect them. It implicates them. Judge Lauren Lake continually reinforces that parenthood in legal form is not dependent on desire but on verified biology. Those who enter with cheating stories hoping to sway emotional reaction soon realize that emotional suffering is not the criterion for legal determination. The court does not ask how betrayal felt. It asks when conception occurred. It does not measure pain. It measures probability. The biological father becomes responsible not because he is emotionally ready, but because science confirmed him. This precision aligns with academic discourse on the concept of justice in jurisprudence, where justice is not idealized but operational. It functions through statutes, lab reports, identity corrections, and support orders. It is practiced through neutrality, not empathy. Judge Lauren Lake embodies this principle, not diminishing human experience but placing it under the authority of legal outcome. For mothers who stand ashamed, recalling overlapping partners and uncertainty, this courtroom does not offer condemnation. It offers closure. For fathers who hope to avoid responsibility, thinking absence or denial could shield them, this courtroom replaces avoidance with obligation. And for those who genuinely desired fatherhood but feared betrayal, the courtroom replaces fear with verified inheritance. Every adoption story's full episode's viewer knows the profound relief when identity is finalized. Judge Lauren Lake delivers that exact finality without narrative decoration. She clarifies repeatedly that children must not grow up in a fog of speculation, held between mistaken claims, or passed between reluctant adults. Identity must be certified, not suggested. Her tone at the end of these rulings is not punitive but instructive. She directs both biological parents to move forward with cooperation, not because they like one another, but because the law requires joint responsibility for the life they created. She emphasizes that co-parenting is not a measure of relationship harmony, but legal maturity. When a child's identity is confirmed, both parties must commit to supporting that identity rather than rewriting it. This is where celebrate recovery testimonies resonate in structural form. Individuals cannot undo their past, but they must not repeat it. The judge reminds them that recovery is not emotional apology but legal compliance. Support payments, visitation schedules, medical communication, educational planning, and future documentation must now be navigated as co-parents, not adversaries. Judge Lauren Lake consistently warns that children are not emotional shields, bargaining chips, or extensions of adult ego. In her courtroom, they are citizens with rights, and those rights supersede adult disappointment. The declared father cannot disappear because he dislikes the mother. The mother cannot withhold access because she dislikes the father. Now that DNA has spoken, the law speaks and both must comply. This mirrors the lesson at the heart of the Divorce Course podcast, which teaches that separation is not personal fracture alone, but legal restructuring. Judge Lauren Lake teaches that parenthood determined by DNA does not expire when romance does. Biology remains binding even when affection leaves. For adults who entered expecting to use testimony to shape reality, the conclusion becomes a radical confrontation. Reality was scientific all along. The DNA test did not create the truth. It revealed it. Those who wish to avoid consequences learn that consequence is not punishment but alignment. Those who desired clarity learn that clarity is not comfort but definition. As the ruling completes, the courtroom is no longer a site of accusation, but a site of formation. The child now has a legally acknowledged father. The father now has legally enforced duties. The mother now has structured corresponsibility. The judge does not congratulate or scold. She finalizes. In doing so, she reinforces that truth changes everything not in sentiment but in statute. The quiet after results is not relief. It is adjustment. This adjustment is the essence of legal justice. Personal lives bent into legal order. The law does not erase hurt, betrayal, or regret, but it prevents those emotions from damaging the child's future. No matter how fragmented the relationship history, how intense the confrontation, or how layered the emotional backstory, Judge Lauren Lake ends on the same principle every time. The child is not responsible for the circumstances of their conception. Adults must grow into legal cooperation regardless of their discomfort. They must now operate as guardians, not rivals. In that conclusion, the courtroom transforms from conflict site to legal blueprint. Identity is no longer floating. It is documented, protected, and enforceable. In this way, family law demonstrates its deepest function, not to validate memory but to anchor identity. Thus, in Judge Lauren Lake's domain, the end of a DNA dispute is not dramatic exit but legal inception. A family system, fractured, messy, emotionally charged, becomes documented, recorded, and binding. Biology becomes responsibility. Truth becomes law. And justice becomes the structured future a child deserves.